Well, good morning again, and welcome to our little Advent Thought series from Tim Chester's book, The One True Story. Perhaps you've seen the little slogan from wartime, keep calm and carry on. Perhaps you've had it emblazoned on a t-shirt or printed on a mug to drink your coffee from. And perhaps you've even bought it for someone this Christmas. Well, King Ahaz in Isaiah 7 is given practically the same advice from God through his prophet Isaiah. And in verse 4, he's told, be careful or be calm, be quiet, do not fear. And his message is for Ahaz, who up until now has not followed God and not followed in the footsteps of his descendant David. But God's message to him effectively is that he has a choice, either to turn toward God in faith or to seek an alliance with the superpower of the day, who is Assyria. The prophet tells Ahaz to ask God for a sign, effectively ask God for his help. But Ahaz replies somewhat piously, I will not ask, I will not put God to the test. Of course, that sounds really grand, like he's doing God a favour, but effectively what he's really saying is, look, I don't need a sign, I don't need God's help. What I've decided to do is to seek that alliance with Assyria, and I'm going to throw my lot in with them. Well, Isaiah's response is one that we're really familiar with, and verse 14 is that response. And he says, therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel. See, we're all familiar with that piece of the story and with that announcement, and with that the story really turns sort of Christmassy, doesn't it? Such a familiar verse to us. But Isaiah here is foretelling that Ahaz will get what he wants. He'll get this alliance with Assyria, but that Assyria will eventually turn on him and come to destroy Israel instead of protect it. As Tim Chester points out ruefully in his book, Isaiah thinks he can do without God, but it is God instead who can manage without Ahaz. Israel is lost and the country is overrun, but there is hope. Even though the temple is eventually destroyed and the people thrown out of the land, Isaiah promises that God will once again come to his people and lead them home. This is the context of yet another very familiar Isaiah passage that we hear so often at Christmas time. I'm sure you've heard it, and you'll have heard it in our carol service on Sunday past if you were there or if you tuned in on YouTube. But Isaiah 9 1-7 reads like this. But there will be no gloom for her who is in anguish. In the former time he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali. But in the latter time he has made glorious the way of the sea, the land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. You have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest, as they are glad when they divide the spoil. For the yoke of his burden and the staff of his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor, you have broken as on the day of Midian. For every boot of the trampling warrior in battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. For unto us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulder, and his name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end, on the throne of David and over his kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and with righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will do this. Again, such a familiar passage just set into its context of an unfaithful king and an unfaithful land being promised hope once again. And what Matthew tells us over in Matthew's Gospel in chapter 1, he tells us is that Jesus is that son who was promised, the one born of a virgin in Bethlehem. Let me turn to Matthew 1 just when we have time together this morning. Matthew 1 and verse 22 and 23. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. They shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. You see, he's saying that this promised son that Isaiah spoke of is here, and his name is Jesus. The baby in the manger is Emmanuel. God is to restore his people and will rescue them from sin and from judgment. Ahaz really should have listened to Isaiah's words and trusted the Lord, and we should do that too today. So don't lose heart when you see people ignoring God and ignoring his word. God's King Jesus reigns forever, and he reigns this Christmas time. Amen, and God bless you.